Thanks for joining, everyone. So I'm Iro, I work at Eton and the head of research, which essentially means that whatever research projects we do at the Thames Valley Centre, I run them and oversee them and ensure that interventions are in place. And there's a lot of resources we put out there. So if you're not very familiar with the Thames Valley Centre, you can either ask me at the end, and I can explain a little bit more what it is we do. So essentially the basis of this presentation, I should say that I'm not a psychologist. My background, so my PhD and my work is in sociology, but I do a lot of work currently on sort of positive psychology and the well-being aspect, because as you can imagine, a lot of schools are very keen to know a little bit more about how to promote well-being and so on. And this particular presentation is based on a big research project we did last year, and we're hoping to expand next year. So again, if you're keen to be involved with that, you can let me know at the end. So essentially what we did is we very much took the work of positive psychologists, and there's a lot of work that is done in the US currently. And we took their framework and we adapted that to be part of 10 schools in total as part of the PSHE provision or the tutorial provision. And it was very much based on how to develop resilience in students. So essentially whatever we found when we were doing the literature review and what the evidence tells us is what I will cover today. Sadly, the project finished in a slightly disappointing way, because as we were sort of finishing it off and collecting all the data, schools closed. But we got some very good results, and we did find out that that was essentially, it was for year 9, but we did find that year 9 students are a very good cohort if you want to develop resilience in them. That doesn't mean obviously that resilience is not something that can be promoted and fostered across the year groups. So I'm just going to share my slides, and I think obviously you will have the recording, but if I don't know, I think Claire, maybe you can circulate slides later. I don't know. It really depends what people want. Okay, can you all see the slides?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Great. So let me just make that. So essentially what we'll cover today, first of all, what is resilience? What is the definition of it? Why does it matter? Characteristics of resilient students, and lastly, some strategies to develop resilience. That will be the bulk of the presentation today. As you can tell, I'm Greek, so I think ancient Greeks go everywhere. And in particular, the idea of resilience and why it's one of those concepts that needs to be developed is because it's very much embedded in social sciences. And we do know that our beliefs, our behaviors, our attitudes, what we think about ourselves and the world around us is very much a combination of two things. One, what we believe about ourselves and the stories we tell ourselves is very much shaped by the world around us. So if students don't feel very confident, they don't feel they can do so well, we do know that they tend to have low resilience, which sort of by default means that they probably don't do so well, both academically and emotionally. However, also the world, we do know that adolescence is a time where students are really impacted by what they see around them. And that is two things. The biggest factor is the peer group. We do know that this is the biggest factor in how they understand the world around them. And I don't know if you have read or if you have seen the TED Talk by Sarah Jane Blakemore, but she was essentially saying that adolescents, they're not by themselves, they're not risky, they don't like taking risks. And if you put them with peers, and for example, they all somehow decide as a group to do something bad, then they will probably take that risk because they are with their peer group. But in the very same situation, if they were by themselves, it was adults by themselves that were more likely to engage in that behavior and not teenagers. So if, for example, well, I'm going to give, if they were challenged by the peers to, I don't know, to skip school, they would probably do it. By themselves, they wouldn't probably do it because that's not how they are. By themselves, they don't like taking risks. So we do know that this particular age is prime for us to develop behaviors and beliefs and attitudes which can really help them. So physical well-being and emotional well-being, and this is where resilience comes in. So what does resilience mean? The definition, which there's a lot of definitions actually, but the one that we have been using is this particular one. So the ability of a person to bounce back after something bad has happened. So after adversity or hardship or failure. So leaving the past behind and thinking, okay, so this is done and that was bad, but what can I do now? So this bounce back after something bad, and doesn't mean that you forget it, but you learn from it, and you're trying to see how you can use that experience to benefit for the future. So what does that mean? Some more research around that. So when we talk about bounce back, it sort of refers a little bit to the idea of thriving. So again, the ability of a person to go beyond the original level of functioning, so grow despite being exposed to stressful experiences. And what we do think, and the researchers think that is good, doesn't mean that for someone to develop resilience or to be happy even, they need to be constantly at that same level of everything is fine. We do need those sort of bad experiences because this is where we can learn those lessons. So a good comparison is if we see life like a going up and down like a seesaw. Sometimes it's good, but then can you actually, kind of go up again if you're down? So it's very much about going through adversity, but being able to be fine after it, recover, learn from it, and move on. This is just to give you an overview of where resilience and the research around resilience comes from. So as you can see, it's not just in psychology, but it's used in all kind of different areas, both clinical and most of medicine and psychology and all of those areas. But also it's something very much used in industry. So when we talk about change management and when a lot of employers are looking for particular traits in their prospective employees, they are looking for resilient people because they do know that even if they do badly, they can just pick themselves up and carry on. And there's a lot of research that has been done in all of these areas and how we can develop resilience, and also what does it look like and what interventions you can put into place to ensure that you have resilient people. I cannot really ask you questions because you're all mute, but you can perhaps nod. Have you ever seen this metaphor before? Has anyone seen this particular bowl? If anyone does know what it is, perhaps you can actually come the mic for a minute. I don't see a problem with that.
I know it. I'm a psychology teacher from South Eton and I'm familiar with it.
Do you want to tell us what it is?
But I'm curious about these things. About painting through the cracks, or seeing it's a bit like the silver lining under a grey cloud. So making something good out of something bad. So for example, if the bowl smashes on the floor, not only do you put it together, you don't hide the cracks, you actually adorn it in order to see it as scars of achievement, something of that nature. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's one area of it. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So one area, yes, you don't try to hide the flaws of something. Clearly, you can see that this was broken, but on the one hand, it's fine, and you can take pride in the fact that it's unique in a sense. But also, it's the fact that, as you can see, this is almost a gold mixture that was used to put it together. So essentially, if you go through this hardship, the idea is that you grow stronger out of it, and you are much more able to withstand future adversity or hardship you might come across. So there's two strands to this particular metaphor. Right. So some more research and evidence. What are we trying to achieve? So when we talk about having resilient kids and students, what does that mean? So first of all, we do know that the students who are resilient, they have high levels of social competence, which means they're able to interact better with their peers. And as you can imagine, that can give you a better classroom, you can give a better school culture, you can improve relationships between teachers and students, but also students and family and the wider social circle. We do know that there could be better problem solving. because they don't see the problem as something that they cannot sort of solve it, or it's too big for them, but they know how to break it down in smaller chunks and ensure that any problem is solvable, and ensure they know what steps to take. We do know that they have a better sense of autonomy and self-efficacy. So they're better able to take responsibility, they have better confidence, they're more independent, and that can be both in their learning and also whatever other areas that might be relevant for their development. And also they have a sense of purpose, hope, or meaning, which means they are more optimistic, they have greater beliefs for the future, and they do believe that actually they have a future they will be able to thrive. So this is why it's important to develop resilience. There's more models that talk about what does that mean and what characteristics resilient students have. So for example, this is from a different study, and as you can see, there is some overlap with what they have found. A couple of slightly different things, that they have better attachment to families, as we said, these relationships, they're able to cope better, and they have positive self-image. So more or less same concepts. And lastly, the 7 C's of resilience. So as you can see, again, very similar things here. So competence, confidence, connection, character, contribution, coping, and control. So across the research base, the characteristics of a resilient student are pretty much the same. And I'm sure that we all agree that these are all very important, both for emotional and academic positive outcomes. There's a lot of, even though I don't really cover it today, we have done quite a lot of work on how things like resilience and some of the concepts that we'll explore today can lead to happiness and well-being. If you're keen on that, I can point you in the right direction where you can get some more information on that. Okay, so whatever we cover today, and I will go through a number of different intervention strategies, and by all means, if you have any questions, you can just jot them down. I can explain later towards the end. But the most important thing, what the research tells us, is that whatever interventions we put in place, they need to be relevant to the particular either individual or group that you're dealing with. So when we talk about what skills they need to develop, and we talk about how to show some of these skills, you know your students a lot better than anyone. So whatever material you choose, or whatever discussions you start, or when you think you might be able to apply some of these interventions and strategies I will cover today, they need to be relevant to your own context. We do know that, so the high level things that we'll cover today, we do know that across the board they are beneficial for students, for adolescents, but it's really up to you how to make them relevant for your students. And there will be a little bit of time at the end where, as Claire said, we can just do a little bit of work in terms of thinking, okay, so these are all of the 10, 12 different strategies we'll see today. How do they apply to your context? And then just jot down, even if it is 5 different things that you can take away from today. Okay, so the first one that I've included here is improving metacognition. Again, I'm just going to ask if anyone, before we talk about the strategies, does anyone, what does metacognition mean? It's just a fancy word, but what does it mean? And what does it mean for you?
Thinking about thinking.
Thinking about thinking, yeah. It is really about the ability of being able to think about the processes that go into your head when you're learning, or as we'll see today, also about your feelings and how you're able to talk about what you feel and what you think. So it's essentially giving students the language, the vocabulary to be able to describe the process that happens when they're trying to learn something, or they find things challenging, or how they're feeling. If they are feeling stressed, or if they're feeling anxious, or if they're feeling happy, can they actually talk about that? As you can see, there's 7 different things here. I would say some of them are somehow easier to do than others. I'm not sure, again, how familiar you are with the whole growth mindset literature and interventions. I know there's a lot of debate whether it works or it doesn't work. I personally think that if it's used in the way that it was first intended by the psychologists that sort of developed the concept, then it can very much promote sort of metacognition and better learning. Again, question for you: what has anyone come across growth mindset and the literature around it? Someone nodding here. Again, I don't know where you stand on it, but growth mindset is very much when you might have a fixed mindset, as it's called, which essentially says that, well, this is my capacity, this is my level, so I might as well just stop trying because I'm never going to get any better. Whereas on the other hand, if you have a growth mindset, it's very much about saying, okay, actually, if I try and if I put effort in, and if I take the necessary steps, then I might be able to actually get better. And even if I do find this particular subject really difficult, that doesn't mean that I will not do it. I mean, I went to school about too many years ago, but I remember I just couldn't get maths. I was a brilliant student. I just couldn't get maths. And because none of those concepts was sort of around at the time, it was just very much, well, maybe you should just give up on maths. Just don't take it after what would be GCSE, just drop it. Whereas I think this is very much a different approach. It doesn't matter if you're not very good at it, you can just put effort in and perhaps you will become better. It doesn't matter if you don't become better because at least you tried. And this is very much around metacognition, the ability to understand what you're finding challenging, what you feel you cannot do, what opportunities there might be for you to become better, and being able to reflect on these things. And students can do this either by very explicitly thinking about thinking, as you said. So why am I finding this difficult? Why is it challenging? What can I change to become better? They can keep journals, logs, whatever you think is, again, relevant to your own context. For them to be able to map and have a log of these processes. Similarly, just a couple of things which might be relevant to your subject or what you're teaching, but this whole idea of giving them, for example, essays, so for them having to answer questions rather than multiple choice. We do know that works in terms of improving metacognition because it asks students to think a little bit deeper for the answer rather than just guess. And this idea of challenging what you tell them, very often students will just nod because they just trust that you're their authority and they will not really question, or they will never really ask why. So again, encouraging them to ask why and question your knowledge, or even just trying to figure out why that particular fact might be a fact. A few more ideas on growth mindset, even though I have already mentioned quite a few things. So Carol Dweck, who developed the concept, and she's still doing a lot of work around it. She has given some phrases, if you like, that you can encourage students to use more often. So for example, what have you learned today? What was the mistakes that you made and what can you learn from them? Were you persistent on something? What was that? And what made you kind of carry on despite the difficulty? What can you learn from the various situations? Then also planning ahead. So what can you do next time that will be to your benefit? And again, what Carol Dweck has said, it doesn't mean that effort and just putting the effort in means that you will not fail or that you will become amazing at everything. That's not what this is about, but it is about putting the effort in and not just giving up because something is too difficult or just challenging. So from that, and similar to it, is the idea of fostering competence. We do know that if students don't really see the purpose in an activity, or if they think that they can do it, again, they might give up, they might not stay engaged. So how can you foster competence? One is differentiation. If you have come across the work of Carol Ann Tomlinson, she talks a lot about differentiation, how it can happen, and she discussed in particular 3 different things that differentiation can happen on 3 different strands. One is on the content that you teach, the other is on the process, and the other is on the outcome. So some students might write an essay, for example, some students might record a video and present their work as a video. It might be that different students are reading different texts, and the main point here is not that that creates a lot more work for the teacher, but it just makes what you do a little more efficient. Again, that really depends how you translate it in your own subject, in your own context. and it might not be relevant on a daily basis, because obviously there are exams, there are tests and so on, but it's more about trying to ensure that all students are included in the learning process. And it might be that you do a lot of peer assessment, for example, or a lot of some more able students helping those that are struggling a little more. Second point here is scaffolding, and this draws from the words from the work of sort of Vygotsky and so these Russians, and essentially is the idea that we do know that if students find something too easy, they will just lose motivation, they will just give up trying, because they think, well, I know that, why should I carry on? So students need to be challenged in a way, not too much, because they might lose motivation again, but that also means that there might need to be some scaffolding. So they need to be challenged to a higher level, but in sort of small steps. So, and that is something that you probably need to do, because students very often, they see the big picture, it's too big for them. So unless it's broken down into smaller chunks, they might not be able to advance to a higher level. But we do know that if there are small incremental steps on a more challenging level, they will probably be able to do it. Showing students work of mastery is something that can also foster competence in them, because they want to see what they can achieve. If someone has done something really good, that probably means they can do it themselves. And we do know that feedback is a really powerful process, especially if it's tailored to individual students, and they know, again, what is the goal? Where do I need to go? And we have done a lot of work around feedback, and so for example, last year I think we did a big piece on a big research project on feedback, and one of the things that students really valued was not so much the quantity, but it was more about the quality. So individual feedback, which shows that you sort of know the student's path and the journey and where they need to be going next. So it's not so much about what they did wrong, but more about, okay, so this is what happened here, but this is what you can do to improve in the future. I'm just going to stop for a second and just say that I know that all of these things probably you probably do all of these things, or a lot of them, or even some more of these things. But they might not even sound entirely related to resilience, but we do know, again, from research that resilience as a concept is it involves a lot of different things in it. So it's not really one particular concept. But if you do want to bounce back, as we said, there are a lot of different areas that you can improve. And we do know that all of these different areas, incrementally, they can actually foster resilience. Right. The other thing that, and this was one particular area that we did in that project, I very briefly mentioned at the beginning. We looked at the character strengths of students. And students need to know what they do really well, but also they need to know what weaknesses they might have. And they need to know what weaknesses they might have, because again, that gives them a goal and something to aspire to and know what they can improve. As I said, for our particular projects and for a lot of the work that we're doing in terms of resilience, we have used also particular frameworks. I'm not entirely sure if this will work, but maybe it will work. We shall see. Here I've included two frameworks. The VIA one is very much based on positive psychology, whereas the Jubilee Centre, which is based in Birmingham, you might have come across the work because they do a lot of work on character education. It takes a more sort of virtues rather than character traits approach. So essentially what you can do here, let me see if this will work.
I use the VIA on my year 10s. I teach business, and we were looking at character traits of entrepreneurs. Yep. And I used the VIA on them, and it was fascinating seeing the conversations that came out of it. It's really good.
Yeah, it is really good. Can you see my screen, or can you still see my slides?
We can still see your slides.
Okay, let me just see if I can do this. Is this okay now?
Yeah, we can see the Institute on Character now.
Yeah. So essentially what this thing does, or is, first of all, has quite a lot of resources, but They have 24 different character strengths, and you can see them here. So things like creativity, gratitude, forgiveness, humility, hope, leadership, sort of self-regulation, so on and so forth. There's 24 of them. So what you can do here essentially is there is a little button here that says take the free survey, and they have different age groups. So it's adults, but also they have for teenagers, so 10 to 17. And essentially what it does is the students put the name, email, but it doesn't collect data because it doesn't really ask you to go back to your email at any point. So essentially they answer this questionnaire, and then at the end it tells them, it ranks these 24 character strengths. And what we asked the students to do, and as you said, so I don't know who spoke, but what we asked them to do was rank, so take the test, it ranked the character strengths for them. And then over the duration of the course that they had to take, they had to go back to the weaknesses they had essentially. So the character strengths that came quite low, and they had to revisit, and they had to see, how am I improving? What goals am I setting? How can I kind of carry on with these things, and where will they help me? And I mean, I don't know about yourselves, but we do know that teenagers, and I know for myself, I like a survey. I like to know more about myself, and we do know that for teenagers it works quite well. They do want to know what character strengths they have. So we have found that this works really well. As the example that was mentioned, so you can do it either for a particular subject, for a particular area, or it can be something that is done at PSHE, for example, and they just revisit it with their tutors for the duration of the year. That they come back to it and they reflect. And this whole idea of metacognition, being able to ask themselves questions and what went well, this is an area that it can be explored through this particular exercise. The other, let me see if this will work. So the Jubilee Centre, as I said, they have a different framework that they use, but you can use it in a similar way. Loading properly. Okay, now it's loaded. Can you see the building blocks of character here?
Yes, you can.
Excellent. So as you can see, they break it down into 4 different areas: so intellectual, moral, civic, and performance virtues. As I said, they don't take a positive psychology sort of literature and say they have a slightly different one. But as you can see here, they have a lot of character traits that, again, you can have a similar process with a student. So you can ask them, okay, which ones do you think you're good at? How do you showcase them? And then which ones do you think you could be doing more? And essentially it's the same process where the students, perhaps they choose 2 or 3 that they feel they can develop throughout the course of a year or a term or 2 terms, or however it works. And then you ask them to go and reflect back on them. And this is where you can make the links between sort of growth mindset and metacognition and fostering competence and building confidence, because if you feel that you're making progress, even if it is in something like showing more honesty, for example, then confidence develops, and then we do know that that's something that contributes to students feeling better about themselves. And so as you can see, it's a cyclical process. So these are just 2 frameworks. There are quite a few more, and if you do want to know more, I can send you some more things. I would say the first one is probably the more student friendly, because they can take that survey and it will tell them what their character strengths are or aren't, so that they can work having those goals. Okay, so the other big area that we have found really links back with resilience, and research suggests that it's a very simple thing to do, but very often we don't do it. And we don't do it because when we talk about gratitude, probably people tend to think that is those big things. So when you go through a very tough situation, someone does something for you, so you feel extreme gratitude towards that particular person. And very often we don't really say, oh, I'm so grateful because today I made it out of bed and I made it into work or school in time, because we just take things for granted. But what research suggests is that we need to draw students' attention to those small and little things, because this is how they can develop better gratitude. So there's no point waiting or hoping that someone will do big acts of kindness towards you for you to feel grateful, because then that will, first of all, they create unrealistic expectations, and second, that's just not how human beings work. So you can do very small things, and they have quite a big impact. So they can start writing gratitude letters, for example, to the people they felt they've done something for them, and that can be anything from a teacher that helped them, or parents that they feed them and they look after them, or their friends because they help them with some sort of homework. So quite small things, but acknowledging those small acts of kindness. You can do something like a daily gratitude log. So my colleague John is here, and he said that for a while he was trying to write the 3 good things every day, or what he was hoping to do today, and then at the end of the day reflecting on whether those 3 things worked. Perhaps you can tell us more about it, because I don't quite remember what you were saying, John, but it's more about 3 things, and it can be quite small things again. And if you have a look at one school, so Queen Anne School, that have a similar research centre, and they had a month of gratitude. So they were calling it something like Nice November, and essentially it was a month of gratitude where students were encouraged actively to think about things that they were grateful for. They were encouraged to post letters, they were encouraged to keep a log every day with the things they were grateful for, and it becomes a thing. So if something becomes a thing at a school, we do know that students are more likely to take part in it. And also it means that you don't, obviously if you say to someone, well, keep a log every day for a year, they're not very likely to carry on with it. But if it's something that is just for a month, we do know that it's very likely they will develop that particular character trait, and the effects will be quite long lasting. Again, as you can imagine, sort of resilience and bouncing back, it means that very often you have to go through those hardships and adversities. So perseverance is very important, the ability not to give up. And one way that this can be developed as a character trait is through encouraging students to identify their passions. Now, that passion may not necessarily be English or maths, it might be something different. But the process of identifying what someone really likes is that they can then see what they can transfer across to a different area of school. So it might be that their passion is playing a musical instrument, or drawing, or singing, or something completely different that it might not necessarily be linked at school. But that doesn't mean that they cannot make those transferable sort of skills take them to their schoolwork. And again, as you can see, it's a little bit about metacognition here. So if you do actually do something, you can start thinking, what do I like about it? Or, why do I care about this? And what matters for this particular thing that I like? Thinking about these things, again, they can identify trends and patterns that they can then transfer across elsewhere. Also, it's very much the case that if you identify something that you really like, even if you're not very good at it, you're very likely to carry on and persevere until you become good at it. And I don't know if you've read Malcolm Gladwell, but he was saying that people need about 10,000 hours practice to become good at something. I think he gave the example of the Beatles, that they were really bad at playing music and singing. I don't know if you like the Beatles, or if you still think they're bad, even though they spent 10,000 hours doing it, and probably more by now. But what he was saying is that they spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours playing in Germany at quite small bars, and then by the end of all of this process, they actually became quite good. And then telling this to students and ensuring they understand that it doesn't matter if I'm not very good at something, but it's about trying and carrying on despite not being very good, but identifying why you like something and how you can become better is definitely a skill that they can then transfer across to maths and English and history and languages and all other subjects. The other thing that can really help them with persevering is if you help them set stretch goals. So they might be slightly good at something, but how can they become better? So set those slightly higher goals for them, because that means they don't just sort of rest and feel okay, that was it. And again, as you can see, there's this back to growth mindset and how scaffolding can be beneficial. So set those stretch goals for them to challenge themselves to become better at things, but also ensure that they practice with concentration and effort. And that's something that it might be that because of these goals are quite sort of tightly put together, they know when they need to feed back to you, so they do know that they have to have that concentration and effort. It might be that they have to feed back to you or their peers. Again, it really depends on your context and how you do sort of coursework or other work that students have to do. Giving, and that is obviously it's written from a student perspective, by giving immediate and informative feedback is very good if students will persist with something and not give up, because unless they have that immediate feedback to see how they're doing, whether they should carry on in that particular direction and try to do something differently, they might again lose interest or hope. And ensure that they reflect, again, this metacognitive aspect, reflect on what they're doing, and do they feel they're doing well? So obviously they have your feedback, but also they're able to map their own progress. And I think this is the last point I make today, the idea of learned optimism. I don't know if anyone has seen at all, there's a quite famous by Brené Brown, maybe the psychologist amongst us, has seen that short YouTube clip where they describe the idea of learned optimism. There's a very good clip on YouTube, and I think you just type learned optimism, it'll come up. It's about 4 or 5 minutes long, and it's really quite good. Essentially, when we talk about optimism, obviously it's all about seeing the glass half full versus half empty. Excuse me, but also what they say is that being optimistic involves 3 things, the 3 P's as they call them. So it's about permanence, pervasiveness, and whether something's personal. So essentially, for someone to be optimistic doesn't mean that they are super optimistic and everything's great, because we do know that if it's not great in the end, they will lose hope and they will go to the other way, which is hopelessness. But what they need to develop is the idea that something, if it went bad, if the situation was bad and if there was a particular adversity or hardship, first of all, it's not permanent. So whatever caused a particular bad event to happen is only temporary, and things will become a lot better very soon. Secondly, that the bad causes are not pervasive. So if something happened in if something bad happened in one particular area of life, and that might be family life or friendships or school, doesn't mean that that will happen across all areas of someone's life. And lastly, that it's not personal. And that again means that because something bad happened, it doesn't mean that the student was to blame or someone else was to blame. But it's more about understanding that things just happen. So again, I would definitely encourage you to watch that short clip, because it explains quite well this whole idea of learned optimism and being realistic about being optimistic. So not thinking that everything will be rosy and nice all the time, but understanding that there will be hardships. And again, that links back to my previous point, that this idea of seesaw, that sometimes things are bad, but do we have learned optimism and understanding that these 3 P's will apply in these situations. Before I give a little bit of time for you to do some planning, I have included the work of Tina Ray. Again, she has written an excellent book on resilience, and a lot of the points that she makes here, I've already sort of covered them and mentioned them. But if you want to, just to have one slide that you should put on the wall, if you like, I think this summarizes it quite well, because it covers a lot of the things that we mentioned. So I'm just going to give you a minute to go through this list. And then what I had in mind, because I didn't know how many people will be here, however, I will still stick with my original plan, is I have 2 different things for you to think about, and perhaps we can do some sharing at the end for those that might want. So essentially, we're going to have a little bit of Q&A if you want to clarify any of the points I made. But also, this was my original plan. So planning ahead, both in terms of what are you already doing, because as I said, you probably already do all of those things. You just don't know that they are research-based. And also, what can you take from the session today? What do you think that's going back to your school, online school, or physical school, or virtual school? What do you think you can take away from the session today? So even if it was 3 things that you think, okay, I can definitely try that and I'm not already doing this, what is that? So shall we have some, does anyone have any questions, or do you want me to clarify any of these things?
I don't have any questions. It all looks great, and thank you very much. I would like to get the slides as soon as possible, particularly for that last one, because I was taking some notes, but I didn't get them all. This is Charlotte, by the way, from Slough and Eton. You wanted to know, I'm responsible for transition of 6 into 7 at Slough and Eton, which is obviously going to be a lot of fun, a lot more fun than normal this year. So I'm going to try and find a way to incorporate that VIA and Jubilee Center character stuff into what we're doing, either remotely, virtually, or when we do any kind of induction kind of processes or events that we can do. So thank you very much.
Thanks. So yes, I would really welcome any thoughts, both in terms of what are you already doing, because I must say that I am very much a researcher, so I only go to classrooms to collect data and give students, ask them questions and do focus groups and questionnaires and so on. But I would really welcome your feedback, both as to what you're already doing, because you might be doing all of those things, and that's great, because then you probably have quite resilient students. Or what else do you think you might take away from the session today? So please just share your thoughts, and I know Claire doesn't have to, as she said, she can sort of edit the recording now, so whatever you say will not be recorded and shared with anyone else. And I've seen that John has shared his exercise of Want to End Well. I think I mentioned the 3 things. Yeah, so the 3 blessings, right? The 3 blessings.
Yeah, in case anyone didn't see that, I've shared that in the chat, and the PDF linked to that. It's been shown by Seligman in various studies that it can significantly improve well-being. It's a daily exercise that you can do at the end of each day.
I know they probably sound quite cheesy, all of these things, well, a lot of the things. So for example, asking a 14, 15-year-old to write a thank you letter to their mum and dad, they'll probably look at you like you're an alien. I mean, I know that if I was a teenager now and someone told me to write a thank you letter, I would just look at them like, what on earth? But I would, again, they are all evidence-based interventions. So we do know that feeling grateful towards your close group, we do know that these close connections that you develop, the quality of the friendships and networks that you have, we do know that they help with well-being and being more resilient, because you feel that you have that support, which can then help you withstand adversity and hardships, and it can help you in the future know that you have people to rely on, for example. And they are pretty simple things. A lot of them is just about, for example, saying thank you, or saying I appreciate that you did that, even though very often we feel it but we don't really say it. So they are pretty small things, but they can be quite powerful in terms of the outcomes. I should also perhaps mention that so as I said, we ran this quite big study. We had about 750 children that took part, and we are looking, so that was for year 9, and we are looking for schools to take part next year. If you feel that is something that you can incorporate into your either tutorials or PSHE or any other time of school life, you can definitely let us know, and we can share the resources with you. So essentially sort of a 2-term course that students do, and they are very much looking at these concepts here. But yeah, it's really up to you, and if you feel that that's something that you can do. But I should also mention perhaps that we do know that all of these things, they are very good if they're taught explicitly, because students need to be aware that, yes, if I do this, this will probably help. So unless, Claire, there's any other questions or people that want to share, and I'm very happy to wrap this up. It's up to you, Claire. Someone said if you haven't registered, how would you get the PowerPoint? Claire, what's your answer?
So if you just want to send me a quick email, so if you send it to info@tvlp.org.uk, and then anyone that sends me their email address, I can forward all the relevant information and documents from today's event to you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you too, Claire, for organizing it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.